Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I am super excited to go through 5 real PMP exam questions with you today. So I'll walk you through the correct answers and the logic behind. I'll give you some tips and tricks to actually think like a project manager, and hopefully you'll feel a little bit more prepared in going into the PMP exam. We've said it before in some of the videos that we've done that the exam itself isn't hard, but you just need to be very strategic with how you write it. And one of the strategies with the PMP exam is elimination of the most incorrect answers and working your way back to the only option that seems to make sense. On the PMP exam, you're looking for the most correct answer out of the options that you have, not what it might be the real correct answer in real life. A lot of folks get tripped up or messed up on this. You have 4 options, 4 or 5 options, I should say, and you need to deduce and use logic to figure out which is the most correct by order of elimination. So we're going to try to find the most incorrect answers first and then work our way backwards to where we're either 50-50 between 2 options or are able to positively say this is the most correct out of all the options that we have. So for today, I'd recommend you grab a pen and a piece of paper so you can make some notes. Also, I'd recommend you pause once we flash up the questions and answers before I go through the logic and answers itself, so you're able to test yourself. Okay, well, let's get started. So, question number 1. A government agency is concerned about the continuity of their projects. Many staff members who started the agency are retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. Their knowledge and experience as project managers of past and current projects will be critical to the agency's future success. A project manager is engaged to steer the efforts. Which 2 options are the best ways of ensuring knowledge transfer? So, key flags here is, okay, we're looking for 2 options and we're looking for the best ways to ensure the transfer of knowledge. So option A, create objectives for a mentorship program of junior staff by senior staff to build a knowledge base. Does this transfer knowledge? Yes, potentially. Capture and archive senior staff member knowledge and establish a community of practice for project management. For those who don't know what a community of practice is, or a COP, it is effectively, it's project therapy. It's a way for folks, project managers, to come together and reflect on the successes or failures of projects, where you discuss as a group emerging trends in your industry or emerging trends in your organization. So it's a really good informal way of learning about projects in your workplace. So establish a COP, prioritize building an organizational culture that values mentoring and a growth mindset. So looks like we're looking to do or expand upon the mentorship program here as well. So does this have some knowledge transfer? Perhaps. Reviewing the agency's continuous improvement plan and ensure it's adequate and understood by everyone. And digitize the lessons learned repository from past projects. So we know we have to select 2 options. Let's work our way backwards now for the most incorrect. So we are looking for the best ways to ensure knowledge transfer. So making sure that knowledge is passed off directly to someone or understood intelligibly. When we transfer knowledge, we want to make sure that there's a bit of a back and forth as well. It's not just a dump. That's not really much of a transfer at all. So digitizing lessons learned from past projects, this is absolutely helpful, and it's probably something that should be done in the organization. But simply digitizing stuff doesn't make it available. There's no back and forth communication. If you're a new person joining the organization, you may not even know where the lessons learned repository is. There may not have an opportunity for you to go back and forth with the PMs who ran those projects. So out of all of the options, I would say this one is the most incorrect of the 4. So now you have A, B, and C. Let's work our way backwards again. Review the agency's continuous improvement plan and ensure it's adequate and understood by everyone. So this is incorrect. So in order to know this, you need to understand what a continuous improvement plan is. This is basically how organizations better themselves in terms of project delivery or the quality of their projects. It's how we make sure that we are growing and getting better. Knowledge transfer may be a part of a continuous improvement plan, but just making sure that it's understood by everyone and it is adequate doesn't quite nail the transference component, because you can't assume transference is even part of the continuous improvement plan. It could be missing. So when we have the 2 correct answers here, A and B, what's the logic as to why they're correct? Creating objectives for a mentorship program, so you're pairing juniors with seniors, we have back and forth communications, and we're building a knowledge base. That actually gets transference of knowledge because I have the opportunity to ask you some questions or share the knowledge that I have. So A is absolutely correct. Capturing and archiving senior staff knowledge, establishing a COP, and prioritizing building an org's culture, valuing mentorship and a growth mindset, that's a very fulsome answer. And that is rooted in the transference of knowledge. If you got stuck on C, you'd make some assumptions about what is and is not in the continuous improvement plan. Knowledge transfer throughout the organization may or may not be a part of a continuous improvement plan. So, based upon the options that you've got in this question, you're really only working with A and B. Hopefully, you got this one correct. Let's move into the next question. A hotel chain wants to improve the customer loyalty program by increasing the number of returning guests by 35%. The project manager finds two strong opinions. Stakeholder J suggests that the sales team focus on the top 10 corporate clients and incentivize them towards exclusive use of this hotel chain. Stakeholder M suggests improving the quality of their airport sites, which already have a large number of repeat guests. Stakeholder M also insists the chain cannot compete in larger markets, so the strategy Stakeholder J suggests will fail. So we have a bit of an attack going on there. In a dramatic escalation, Stakeholder M sends an email to the project manager and the entire leadership team accusing Stakeholder J of having a bias. Ooh. What should the project manager do first? Okay. This is a pretty reflective real-world situation that can happen. We do have some conflict going on. The PM does need to tread lightly in this situation. So what should they do first? Mediate between the two stakeholders and determine an initial scope that satisfies both. Coach Stakeholder M about professional behavior and ask them to apologize to Stakeholder J. Escalate this as an issue to human resources or remove Stakeholder M from the project for a violation of ethical standards. Okay, so let's apply the logic of working our way backwards and finding the most incorrect options first. We have a situation of conflict here. We have a situation where stakeholder groups or a stakeholder has kind of operated outside of a professional bounds. So we do need to come to some reasonable resolution. So can we remove Stakeholder M from the project for the violation of ethical standards? This is probably the first most incorrect option. It might not be within the scope or authority, I should say, of the project manager to remove a stakeholder. It's oftentimes, we don't know who that stakeholder is. It could be a director, it could be an executive director, etc. So the project manager may not actually have authority to remove this person at all. And when we're saying that there's a violation of ethical standards, it's rather ambiguous in this answer, in this question, I should say, as to what ethical standards they may have violated. Let's work our way backwards through the most incorrect options here. So I would say D, removing Stakeholder M from the project for a violation of ethical standards. This is probably the most incorrect option of the four. The logic here. The PM may or may not have the ability and the authority to remove a stakeholder. A stakeholder can be anyone on a project, a director, an executive director, a minister, etc. So the PM may or may not be able to do this in practice. Plus, it's rather ambiguous what ethical standard has been violated. We don't know if there's a human resource violation. We don't know if we're talking about the PMI's code of ethics and whether or not this person may be held to the PMI's code of ethics. So because of the ambiguity here of the ethical standard and the assumption that the PM can just remove stakeholder groups, this would be the most incorrect. Again, PMs don't get to do this often at all. Removing a stakeholder group probably would hurt the project in the long run. So that's D is probably the most incorrect. Escalating this as an issue to human resources is likely the next most incorrect option. Now, you may have to escalate this as an issue to human resources if there's no immediate resolve. Escalation to human resources should probably be done after the project manager has exhausted all reasonable alternatives. So this is correct, but not the most correct given the options that we have. Now you're between two options, A and B. Take a minute and determine which one you think is the most correct. Hopefully, you've selected A. Mediate between two stakeholders and determine a scope that satisfies both. Why is this correct? Well, we know that these folks are in Lee's levels of conflict, probably in the contest stage. We need to, as a project manager or as a manager in general, help focus these two parties on resolving the issue of the work and not the interpersonal conflict. Focus on the problem of increasing the guests by 35% and not on the personal issues that we tend to get sidetracked in a corporate or business environment. So the reasonable thing to do in this situation would be to sit both individuals together and mediate and negotiate a solution that works well for both. You likely would have a conversation with stakeholder M if it was within your authority as a PM to do so, to talk about professional behavior. Now, I say that because we don't know who this stakeholder is. It may be far too out of scope or authority for the PM to have this conversation directly themselves. We don't know if the PM is part of the organization or is a consultant. So it might not be professional to have this conversation at all. The PM may have to back channel a little bit, but it's possible that you try to coach that stakeholder about professional behavior. Asking them to apologize to stakeholder J, that assumes guilt. It kind of oversteps the bounds of what is at issue here. Therefore, the most correct option is going to be option A, mediation. Now, this makes sense, of course, when you think about how we deal with conflict in the workplace and the different types of conflict you might see on the exam. Win-win is always the best approach. If we went with option B here, we're actually kind of assuming that there's a win-lose. We're asking stakeholder M to apologize, thereby admitting guilt or fault. This could have a long-term ripple impact on the project's success. It could have a long-term ripple impact upon the relationships between the PM and the stakeholder groups as well. So keeping things as simple as we can with the options that we can, mediation would be the best. We might back channel and have some conversations around behavior if it's appropriate. And if that all fails, we might have to go to human resources. But of course, we're not going to remove that stakeholder simply because there was an outburst during a tense period of time. Projects are stressful, and it's not unusual to have situations like this crop up. A project team working in a city transportation agency is planning the launch of a 24-hour subway service for the first time in its 120-year history. 1 month before the launch, a terrible electrical accident shuts down the service for the whole city, causing injuries and millions of dollars of damage to the infrastructure. What should the project manager do? Okay, so let's just quickly review this question one more time. We're about a month from launch. The entire city has lost service. So pretty much everyone in the whole city is going to know about this. It's going to be a big accident or a big issue in the newspapers. There's injuries and millions of dollars of damage. So there is going to be a lot of press coverage on this thing, I would reckon. What should the project manager do? Close the project, consult the communications management plan, review the risk register, or contact the project sponsor. So let's work our way backwards through the most incorrect down to one or two options. Let's use some logic to find the most incorrect answer first, and then work our way back to where we have one or two options that we can choose from. So, what do you think the most incorrect option is out of the four? Hopefully, you chose close the project. Just because we've had a bad day doesn't mean we can shut down the project. The project management team does have some responsibilities here in that, immediately after an accident like this, closing out the project is something that could happen in a few months down the line if it was deemed unsafe, but as the first thing that a PM should do here, not so much. It's also likely not within their authority to close this thing in the first place. Test yourself on the next most incorrect option. Hopefully you're leaning towards contact the project sponsor. This one's incorrect because we don't know really what the conversation around this contact is. We don't know what's being said here. Contacting this project sponsor is simply letting them know that something has happened. That's incorrect. In project management, PMs need to go to sponsors with solutions. We don't want to waste their time by simply asking them to solve the problems for us or just passively giving them an update. We want to go to them with facts, figures, and a plan. So you absolutely will contact the project sponsor at some point, but you might want to take some preventative or proactive steps before contacting them. And again, in the context of this, contacting the PM or the sponsor, I should say, just kind of sounds like you're picking up the phone. So there's not a whole lot of action being taken here by the project manager. Okay, you're between B and C now. What do you think is the most incorrect? Hopefully you've got review the risk register. Reviewing the risk register is something you would probably do in the post-mortem of this, but because we have got such a massive failure 1 month from launch, everyone in the city knows we should probably contact, or take a look rather, at our communications management plan. Now, what is the logic to this? We need to act quickly. Everyone needs to be made aware of the issue. Everyone needs to be made aware in the city of what the plan is for resolution. Everyone needs to be communicated to, presumably, or someone needs to be communicated to. And how to figure that out would be to look at the communications management plan. It's possible that there is a plan in place for when there is an electrical failure for communications, who to contact, when, and why. There might be a line in the comms plan as to what to do communications-wise if there is someone who has been injured on the site, for example. So consulting the communications management plan is the most correct option, because from that, it would look like you'd have to take some proactive actions, or actions that come from what is inside of that plan. Comms plans detail what to do and when in communications situations. So this is, out of the options, the one that would most likely have a meaningful result or meaningful resolution. Question 4. A project that is in progress requires a resource with a specialized skill. Because of time limitations, the Agile team has 2 options. Either borrow a team member from another department who can work part-time, or use an independent contractor. The 8 team members discuss the options, but they are unable to reach an agreement. The vote is 50-50. Both options have positive benefits as well as risks. What should the project do? Okay, so this question has a little bit of noise in it. The specialized skill, limitations, etc. But at root of it, it's asking, what do you do when you are stuck with a 50-50 decision? So let's look at the options we've got. Use Roman voting, which is thumbs up or thumbs down. Empower the team lead to make a decision based on multi-criteria analysis. Wait until the next retrospective and ask again. Or ask the product owner to decide. Okay, so remember, best practice here, work your way backwards if you need to, or if you're stuck. So most incorrect options, hopefully you are leaning towards C, wait until the next retrospective and ask again. Waiting, you don't know when the next retrospective could be. It could be a week, it could be at the end of the launch, and we don't really know how impactful the lack of a resource here may be. It's possible that you cannot complete your next sprint without this individual, so you might fail your next sprint or not be able to do it, or can highly modify it. So waiting until the next retrospective is not the most appropriate. You're not going to get a whole lot of work done if you wait that long. Asking the product owner to decide. The problem here is the product owner's job isn't to make calls like this when it comes to specialized resources. The product owner isn't a developer. They don't know the impacts or how to do things. So it's up to the project team to make this call, and it's going to have to align to their way of working and what they need in that moment. The product owner is a little removed from the needs of a dev team in an Agile project, so the product owner isn't the best choice to have here. Next most incorrect would be using Roman voting, so the thumbs up or thumbs down approach. They've already done that. They've done a vote, and they've reached 50-50. So in theory, they've had 4 thumbs up and 4 thumbs down. If they were to use Roman voting, it's just another way of coming to the exact same conclusion of a deadlock. So based upon this, B seems like the best answer, empowering the team lead to make a decision based on multi-criteria decision analysis. So there's a few other reasons why this would be the most correct. So a team lead in Agile projects, leadership can be moved around. It's diffused. So in one sprint where we have something very technical, maybe the most senior, most technical person on that team can operate as lead temporarily and then pass off the leadership role in the next sprint. So it's team leadership on Agile projects is something that can be moved around. That's somewhat key to know here because we're looking for specialized skill sets. We're an Agile team, so we know that the team lead probably for the time being has a bit more authority. And they're going to use a multi-criteria decision analysis and encourage the team lead to make that call. So what we're doing here is looking at another way of analyzing the situation. They've tried voting through some form or means, perhaps using Roman voting already. Multi-criteria decision analysis or multi-criteria analysis is a way of making a decision based on available data. So you look at all of the available criteria, the inputs, the outputs, the needs and the wants, etc. that's available for you for this decision. And they document all of that information effectively on a page or a slide deck or however they choose to document it. But the heart of it and the root of it is we have the source of information for someone to make an informed decision. And that someone in an Agile team in this context would likely be the team lead. So B is the most correct option that you have. We don't want to ask the product owner because it's outside of their scope. They may make a bad call because they're not too technical. Waiting for the next retrospective could be a very long time. And Roman voting, again, is just the definition of insanity. It's doing the same thing again and again. Plus, you don't know if they've already used Roman voting as a technique. So B would be the most correct option. Okay, last question. A pharmaceutical company has manufactured its best-selling product for more than 50 years. Production has steadily increased, and the company is ready to make significant investment to expand the business. Leadership asks the project management team to carefully assess the risk of this expansion. What should the team focus on? So at the heart of this question, we are looking for what to focus on to assess risk. Most incorrect option. Take a minute and think about that. Hopefully, you are leading towards last year's annual budget. Are we going to focus on this? No. Is it something we should look at to assess risk? Likely at some point, but it's a budget. It's not necessarily the most indicative of the risks of everything related to an expansion. It wouldn't necessarily tell us things like market risk to reputation, etc. It really would only tell us a little bit about some of the financial risks. Big concerns for sure, but not all of the risks of expansion. Would we look at the the stakeholder profiles? Yes, but it's not the best option. Understanding the risk tolerances of the various stakeholders that are impacted by this expansion is something you should likely do, but it wouldn't be the focal point. Again, we want to understand broadly what's going to happen. So in order to take a look at that, we need to look at a whole bunch of different sources of information. Stakeholder profiles isn't necessarily the best place to start. The company's mission statement, this is very useful. However, it's somewhat limited. The mission statement is the aspiration of the company. So it's good to understand, but it's not the focal point of risks. Again, you want to understand what's the purpose of the company, what its why is, but just reviewing the mission statement, you're not going to get a whole lot of understanding or information. The product roadmap would be your key to assessing risk, or the first place that you should start. The team needs to understand the full scope of the expansion to determine the risk in the first place. Taking a look at what are we expanding, what's being added, etc., that helps us understand risks in its context more. We need to understand what is changing so that we can understand who is impacted and by how much. So the product roadmap would be the place to look here. A roadmap is an artifact created by the project team that details the direction for the product itself. It would articulate what is going to be expanded upon and when at a high level. It would also help set some of the vision and direction of what this expansion looks like. If you know what the vision and direction of the actual expansion is, then you can properly assess the risk by understanding what components of the product or company or stakeholders or markets would be impacted by the expansion. All the stuff on screen here is more or less correct. You would want to review all of this, but you cannot understand the impact of the expansion without first understanding what the expansion is. You have to start with the why, or start with the what in this case. All of these options are things you would likely take a look at when assessing risk, but we want to understand the risk of the expansion. In order to do so, we need to understand what is inside of the expansion itself. The only thing that gives us any indication of what is going to come would be the product roadmap. Last year's annual budget looks at past performance financially, or past budgets. Good information, but not necessarily useful to understand risks in the future. Stakeholder profiles, good information as well, but without understanding what is being impacted or how they're being impacted by the expansion, I should say, their profiles are more or less irrelevant. And the company's mission statement, again, it's aspirational. It won't go into the details necessarily of what the expansion will include. The product roadmap, that's the crunchy bits. That's the stuff where you can start to put the pieces together and understand what impacts there will be to the economic, the product roadmap is the crunchy bit of the expansion. It would tell you more or less what is being expanded upon and when, so you can understand what to start to look at to assess risk. Out of all the options, option C is the most correct here. Hopefully you got 5 out of 5 and are ready to write the PMP exam. If you feel comfortable, let me know your score in the comments, or let me know which questions tripped you up. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you would like to see more PMP or CAPM practice videos, don't forget to like and subscribe.